The morning sun cuts sharp across Fort Bragg's training grounds, painting long shadows over weathered concrete and worn obstacle courses that had tested thousands of warriors before. Captain Elara Thorne stepped from the administrative building into air that tasted of diesel fuel, gun oil, and North Carolina pine. 28 years old, 5'7", lean muscle wrapped tight over a frame that had been broken and rebuilt more times than her carefully sanitized personnel file would ever acknowledge. Her boots hit gravel with the measured cadence of someone who'd learned long ago that unnecessary sound could mean the difference between breathing and bleeding out in foreign dirt under hostile stars. She wore the standard olive drab uniform without a single modification. No unit patches proclaiming brotherhood forged in fire. No campaign ribbons telling stories of distant battles. No commendations marking her as exceptional among the exceptional. Nothing that marked her as different from a fresh officer straight out of training, still soft and untested. Just regulation everything, crisp and anonymous, like she'd been issued from supply that morning along with the rifles and ammunition. The Joint Task Force training program had assembled 24 of America's finest killers. Navy SEALs who'd hunted high-value targets through Kandahar's labyrinth streets, kicking down doors at 3 in the morning with the certainty that hesitation meant death. Delta Force operators who'd done things in Yemen and Somalia that would never see congressional oversight. Actions that existed only in classified files buried so deep they'd been effectively erased from history. Rangers who could call artillery danger close and walk away grinning while the earth shook beneath their boots. Air Force Special Tactics controllers who'd coordinated strikes that turned grid coordinates into graves, watching through thermal imaging as buildings became tombs. And then there was Elara, number 25, the outsider, the anomaly that didn't fit the pattern. She crossed the quad toward the Tactical Operations Building, aware of eyes tracking her movement like targeting reticles finding range. Conversations didn't stop when she passed. That would have been too obvious, too crude. Instead, they shifted, lowered, took on that particular edge that men develop when discussing something they find simultaneously fascinating and offensive. A woman in their midst, not as support staff or administrative personnel where women belonged, but as an operator, as one of them. The presumption offended them at a level they couldn't quite articulate but felt in their bones. Inside the briefing room, the temperature dropped 10 degrees. Not from air conditioning straining against Carolina summer heat, but from the collective chill of 24 alpha predators deciding whether the newcomer was pack or prey. The walls were decorated with unit insignia from every Special Operations Command. SEAL tridents, Special Forces flashes, Ranger tabs, Delta unit patches that officially didn't exist. A gallery of elite warriors watching over their descendants. Lieutenant Darius Kane lounged against the front desk, all 6'2" of compact violence wrapped in the casual arrogance of someone who'd survived things that killed better men. 12 years as a SEAL, 3 Afghanistan deployments where he'd stacked bodies like cordwood, 4 bronze stars with valor devices that he wore with the indifference of someone who knew his worth wasn't measured by metal pinned to cloth. His face carried that particular weathering that came from too many nights in too many deserts, too many cities reduced to rubble, too many moments when split-second decisions determined who went home and who went home in boxes. Eyes the color of gunmetal tracked Elara like targeting reticles, finding range and calculating windage. "Well, look what the Pentagon shipped us," he announced, voice pitched to carry through the room like a challenge. "Diversity hire with a nice new commission. Tell me, Captain, which box did you check to fast-track through selection? Female? Or did you find some other special category to exploit?" The room erupted in laughter. Not the good-natured ribbing that warriors used to test each other's mettle, the kind that said, "Welcome to the team, now prove you belong." This was sharper, meaner, designed to draw blood and establish dominance. The kind of laughter that came from men who felt their sacred space had been invaded by someone who hadn't earned entry through the traditional crucibles of pain and blood. Kane grabbed a tactical binder from the nearest desk, 300 pages of operational procedures and range cards, and hurled it with the same precision he'd used throwing a grenade. The binder caught Ilara square in the chest with a dull thud that echoed through the sudden silence. Papers exploding outward in a cascade of operational procedures and range cards that scattered across worn linoleum like oversized confetti. It hit hard enough to bruise, hard enough to hurt, hard enough to make a point. Ilara didn't flinch, didn't even blink. She didn't bend to collect the scattered papers, didn't acknowledge Kane's existence, didn't show even a flicker of the anger or humiliation that any normal person would feel. Her expression remained absolutely neutral. That carefully constructed mask she'd worn for so long, it had become indistinguishable from her actual face. She simply stepped over the mess with the careful precision of someone navigating a minefield, walked to the back row, and took a seat. Her movements were economical, controlled, giving away nothing. Her right hand rested on the desktop, fingers relaxed in a way that paradoxically suggested complete readiness for violence. On her wrist, partially visible beneath the uniform cuff, ran a tattoo. A broken sword, the blade snapped cleanly in half at its midpoint, with 7 precise horizontal lines etched beneath the fracture point like tally marks. The ink was old, faded to that blue-gray color that spoke of years and hard living, the kind of work done in conditions far from any professional parlor. Field work, combat work. No one paid attention to it, not yet, but they would. "She'll wash out by lunch," muttered Master Chief Garrett Lawson to the SEAL sitting beside him, voice carrying just far enough. Lawson was 44, built like a linebacker who'd traded bulk for endurance over 2 decades of hard use, with a face that looked like it had stopped shrapnel with its teeth and hadn't bothered getting all the pieces removed. 22 years in naval special warfare. More combat actions than most soldiers had training exercises. Enough close calls that he should have been dead 3 times over by simple statistics. $5 says she cries before first break. 10 says she's requesting transfer by dinner. Around the room, other warriors made their own assessments and calculations. This wasn't personal, not yet. This was simply the brutal mathematics of men who'd survived by trusting their teammates absolutely, who needed to know that the person next to them in the breach could carry their weight when bullets started flying and everything turned to chaos. A woman, regardless of her file or credentials, represented an unknown variable in an equation where unknowns got people killed. The door crashed open with the authority of a flashbang detonation. Colonel Marshall Graves strode in like he owned not just the room, but the entire concept of military authority. Every step a statement of dominance earned through decades at the sharp end of America's spear. 68 years old, but moving with the predatory economy of a man half that age. Joints and tendons remembering patterns learned when most of these trainees were still in diapers. His uniform bore the markers of a career spent in places that didn't officially exist. Silver stars from operations that remained classified. Purple hearts from wounds that had nearly killed him in deserts whose names he still couldn't speak. Combat infantry badges that went back to Gulf War operations when these trainees were still in elementary school. His face was all hard angles and sun damage, carved from something tougher than flesh by years of squinting into hostile distances and making decisions that turned living, breathing human beings into statistics in after-action reports. Eyes like chips of blue ice swept the room, cataloging, assessing, measuring each man against standards they couldn't see but would definitely feel. He'd commanded men in combat for 30 years. He could read a warrior's quality at a glance. "Listen up," Graves said, voice like gravel under tank treads, each word weighted with absolute authority. "You're here because you represent the best your branches could offer. SEALs, Delta, Rangers, Special Tactics. Each of you has proven yourself in combat situations where most soldiers would have broken. Each of you thinks you're the hardest warrior in this room, the one who'll excel while everyone else struggles. He paused, letting the silence build like pressure before an explosion, watching them with the cold assessment of a man who'd seen 1,000 warriors and could predict with 90% accuracy which ones would succeed and which would fail. You're all wrong. Over the next 12 weeks, we're going to break you down to component parts and rebuild you into something more effective than any single branch could produce. We're going to take everything you think you know about combat and force you to rebuild it from the ground up. Half of you won't make it past the first evaluation. Most of you won't make it to graduation. And those who do will have earned the right to call themselves something more than whatever you were when you walked through that door. Graves activated the wall-mounted display with a remote that looked tiny in his weathered hands. Tactical formations materialized in 3 dimensions: urban environments, compound structures, 3-dimensional renderings of kill houses, and target buildings where every corner could hide death. Tactical operations in constrained environments, he continued, voice never rising but somehow carrying absolute authority. You'll learn to function as a unified element across all operational domains. Close quarters battle where hesitation means friendly fire casualties. Urban warfare where every window could hide a sniper and every doorway could be booby-trapped. Hostage rescue where one wrong move means dead civilians and international incidents. High-value target elimination where the margin between success and catastrophic failure is measured in fractions of seconds. Every scenario designed to expose your weaknesses and punish your mistakes until you learn or you quit. For the next 90 minutes, Graves dissected combat scenarios with the surgical precision of a master craftsman explaining his art. Entry techniques that balanced speed against security. Angles of fire that maximized lethality while minimizing fratricide risk. Communication protocols that could mean the difference between coordinated violence and chaos. The physics of violence in confined spaces where ricochets killed as many people as direct fire, where flashbangs in the wrong room could permanently blind hostages, where every decision cascaded into consequences that compounded geometrically. Throughout the lecture, Ilara's pen moved across her notebook in slow, deliberate strokes that suggested absolute concentration. She never looked up from the page, never asked questions when Graves paused to invite them, never made eye contact or did anything to draw attention to herself. The only indication she was processing the information, rather than simply transcribing it, came when Graves described a particularly complex extraction scenario involving multiple hostages, limited exit routes, and hostile reinforcements converging on the position. Her pen paused for perhaps 2 seconds, the nib resting against paper as if she was running calculations or comparing the scenario against personal experience. Then it resumed its steady progress across the page, leaving neat lines of text that, if anyone had bothered to look, would have shown not student notes, but professional analysis that incorporated considerations Graves hadn't even mentioned. Kane noticed the pause. He leaned toward the ranger sitting next to him, a broad-shouldered man named Webb, who'd made his reputation breaching doors in Fallujah. "Look at her," Kane said, voice deliberately loud enough to carry, probably drawing stick figures, needs pictures to understand the big words we're using. Subdued laughter rippled through the nearby seats like a wave finding shore. The kind of laughter that bonds men together by establishing who's in the circle and who's outside it. Ilara's pen never stopped moving. Her expression never changed. She simply continued taking notes as if she hadn't heard a word, as if the mockery was happening in a different room to a different person. When Graves finally dismissed them for the first physical assessment, the trainees filed outside into morning sun that had climbed higher and hotter, burning off the last coolness from the North Carolina dawn. The obstacle course stretched before them like an accusation. 12-foot walls, barbed wire runs, rope climbs, monkey bars slick with morning dew, Tire runs that looked easy but would have their thighs burning before they hit the halfway point. Standard stuff, the kind of course every one of them had run hundreds of times. But they'd be running it now under assessment, with every second timed and every mistake recorded. Ilara stood by the water station, taking measured sips from her canteen. Hydration was tactical. Everything was tactical when you'd learned to think the way she had. When survival depended on controlling every variable you could control, because the universe would throw enough uncontrollable variables at you on its own. Corporal Marcus Webb spotted her and sauntered over, all 200 pounds of infantry muscle and misplaced confidence that came from thinking physical dominance was the only kind that mattered. He grabbed a plastic cup, filled it from the water cooler with exaggerated casualness, and without breaking stride, flung the contents directly at Ilara's chest with a flick of his wrist that sent water exploding across her uniform. Water detonated across her uniform, soaking through fabric in an instant, dripping onto her boots in a steady patter. The cold shock of it should have made her gasp, should have made her react. She didn't. The watching trainees erupted in hooting laughter. Someone started a slow clap that others picked up, turning it into a rhythm of mockery. More joined in, voices rising in volume in cruel amusement. Ilara stood motionless in her wet uniform. Water trickled down her sleeve, collected at her wrist where the broken sword tattoo darkened with moisture, the 7 lines beneath it seeming to stand out more clearly as the water made the old ink swell slightly. She didn't wipe it away, didn't acknowledge Webb, didn't acknowledge any of them. Her face remained absolutely neutral, revealing nothing of whatever thoughts or emotions might exist beneath the surface. She simply screwed the cap back on her canteen with mechanical precision, each rotation exact and controlled, and walked toward the starting line of the obstacle course. Her wet boots left damp footprints in the dirt, a trail of humiliation for anyone watching, a marker of weakness for men who measured worth by the ability to project strength. "Go file some paperwork, princess," Webb shouted after her, voice full of contempt. "This is a warrior course, not a typing pool." The laughter followed her all the way to the starting position, a sound like hunting dogs on a scent, predatory and cruel. What happened next killed the laughter dead. The instructor's whistle cut the air like a blade. Ilara exploded forward with violence that seemed to come from nowhere, 0 to sprint in a fraction of a second. She didn't run the obstacle course the way the others did, with determination and grit and the grinding persistence that special operations selected for. She flowed through it like water finding the path of least resistance. Every movement, economy itself, no wasted motion, no hesitation, no doubt. She hit the 12-foot wall at full speed and went up it without using the knotted rope that hung there for assistance. Her fingers found purchase in gaps between boards that most people couldn't even see, pressing into spaces barely wide enough to fit fingertips, and she pulled herself over the top with upper body strength that belied her frame. The dismount on the other side was controlled, knees bent to absorb impact, already moving forward before her second foot touched ground. Through the barbed wire, she moved like liquid mercury, body compressed to impossible flatness, rolling and sliding beneath razor strands that should have shredded anyone moving that fast. The technique was perfect. Not the desperate belly crawl most people used, but something more sophisticated, something that looked almost like a dance as she used specific muscle groups to keep her body profile minimal while maintaining forward momentum. The rope climb she attacked with a technique that bypassed the usual hand-over-hand grunt work that left most people's arms burning. Her legs locked the rope in a break and climb method, using lower body strength and leverage instead of just arm strength, and she was at the top in seconds that seemed impossible. Bell ringing, already dropping back to earth in a controlled fall that bent knees and rolled through hips to dissipate impact force. The monkey bars became a blur of hand-over-hand movement so fast it looked like special effects. The tire run was a rhythmic drum of boot strikes that never missed the center of each rubber circle, never hesitated, never broke rhythm. She crossed the finish line in third place overall. Not first, she wasn't trying to dominate or make a statement, but third out of 25, ahead of 22 warriors who'd been mocking her minutes earlier. Her time beat 18 of the men who'd been laughing, beat 5 SEALs and 3 Rangers and 2 Delta operators who'd thought themselves untouchable. Her breathing was elevated but controlled, pulse probably already settling back toward resting rate through trained cardiovascular efficiency. Sweat darkened her uniform, but not excessively. She looked like she could run the course again right now if ordered. No triumph showed on her face. No satisfaction, no vindication or smugness at having proven the doubters wrong. She simply walked to the sidelines, chest still heaving slightly, and waited for further instructions with the same neutral expression she'd maintained all morning. The transformation in the watching crowd was subtle but real. The laughter had died like someone had cut its throat. Some of the smirks had faded, replaced by calculation and reassessment. A few of the trainees were looking at her differently now, running new calculations about who this woman might actually be beneath the unremarkable exterior. But the damage was done. The nickname had already taken root, spreading through the group like a virus finding susceptible hosts. By lunch, everyone was calling her Paper Thorn. The captain who looked good on paper, whose file said all the right things but who, they assumed, would crumble when things got real. Never mind that she just outperformed most of them. That didn't fit the narrative they'd constructed, so they dismissed it as a fluke or luck or the course being easier than it looked. The mess hall was all stainless steel surfaces and fluorescent lights that turned food unappetizing colors, filled with the clatter of trays and the low roar of warrior voices bouncing off hard surfaces. Ilara sat alone at a corner table, a tray of food before her that she ate with mechanical efficiency. Fuel, nothing more. She'd learned long ago not to attach emotion to eating, learned it in places where food was scarce, and celebrating a meal was a luxury that could get you killed. Kane strode by with his growing entourage of followers, who decided aligning with him was the smart political move, his tray clattering as he set it down at a nearby table with more force than necessary. Paper Thorn, he called, loud enough for the entire room to hear, for maximum humiliation impact. You here to sketch tactical diagrams, or can you actually read them? Maybe you need us to explain using smaller words? His followers banged fists on the table in appreciation, the percussion of mockery adding their laughter to his words. A British exchange officer with sharp features and an expensive watch that suggested family money chimed in, his accent making the cruelty sound almost polite. No, mate, she's here to keep our desks organized. Make sure the real operators have proper administrative support when we get back from actual missions. The mess hall wasn't laughing with them. Not exactly. Most of the room was ignoring the interaction, focused on their own food and conversations. But enough were watching with interest to make Ilara's isolation complete, enough to establish that she was outside the circle, marked as different and therefore suspect. She didn't look up. She speared a piece of chicken with surgical precision and ate slowly, methodically, as if she hadn't heard a single word, as if the mockery was happening in a different building, to a different person, in a different life. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across her face, highlighting pronounced cheekbones that spoke of genetics honed by hardship, and a small scar above her right eyebrow. A detail no one had bothered to notice because they'd already decided who she was, and details that contradicted that decision were simply filtered out. Kane leaned back in his chair, balancing on 2 legs, playing to his audience. Seriously, who approved your packet? This is a combat training program, not secretarial school. Did you get lost on the way to the typing pool? A few trainees glanced at Ilara, waiting for her to snap back, to show some sign that the constant barrage was penetrating her armor, that she was human enough to feel the cuts they were inflicting. She didn't give them the satisfaction. She set her fork down with the same measured precision she brought to everything, each motion exact and controlled, wiped her hands on a napkin with careful attention to each finger, stood. Her chair scraped against linoleum, the sound cutting through the cafeteria noise like a knife through silk, creating a moment of silence in which everyone nearby turned to watch. She picked up her tray, walked to the dish return with perfect posture and controlled pace, and left without a backward glance or a word or any acknowledgement that the last 10 minutes had happened. Outside, Elara paused in the shadow of an old oak tree, its branches spreading overhead like the skeletal fingers of something long dead, but still reaching for the sky. Her eyes scanned the compound with methodical precision that would have alarmed anyone paying attention. Not the curious looking of a newcomer, but the tactical assessment of someone mapping sightlines and escape routes. The admin building, the motor pool, the armory, approaches and withdrawal routes, cover positions, choke points, fields of fire. For just a moment, her composed facade cracked, a slight tightening around her eyes, a barely perceptible clench of her jaw, muscles tensing in her neck, the kind of micro-expressions that betrayed stress held under enormous pressure. Then it was gone, replaced by the same impenetrable calm, the mask settling back into place so smoothly it was like the crack had never existed. She drew a deep breath, held it for 4 seconds, released it over 6, and headed toward the afternoon's land navigation exercise with the same steady pace she brought to everything. The navigation drill took place in the dense forest surrounding Fort Bragg, thousands of acres of wilderness filled with ravines and false trails, and terrain that could kill the careless or unprepared. Trainees were paired randomly by drawing numbers from a helmet, given compass and map and a mission packet containing 3 checkpoints they needed to reach before nightfall, using only basic navigation skills. Elara found herself paired with Sergeant Thomas Riggs, a Green Beret with a reputation for brutal efficiency in the field, and a face that suggested he'd been chewing nails for breakfast since before most of these trainees were born. 15 years in Special Forces, multiple deployments to every shithole on the planet, the kind of operator who made problems disappear efficiently and without fuss. "Don't slow me down, Paper Thorn," Riggs warned as the instructor handed him their packet, snatching it from the man's hand. "I've got a perfect record in land nav, not letting some quota hire ruin it because she can't read a map." He snatched the topographical map before Elara could unfold it, spreading it across his knee with the confidence of someone who'd navigated through hostile territory 100 times. "I'll handle this. You just try to keep up and stay out of the way." The 4-man team headed into the forest at Riggs's punishing pace, boots crunching through undergrowth, branches whipping at faces and hands. Dense Carolina pine pressed in from all sides, the canopy thick enough to turn midday into twilight, creating a dim green world where distances were deceptive. The air smelled of decomposing leaves and red clay and the organic rot of a forest in summer. Elara trailed behind, compass in hand, eyes constantly scanning, not just looking but reading terrain, tracking their progress against the mental map she was building with each step, each landmark, each subtle change in elevation or drainage pattern. The way water would flow, the way military planners would route supply lines, the way an enemy would establish an ambush. 30 minutes in, Riggs halted abruptly, teams stacking up behind him. They were nowhere near the first checkpoint. The map was crumpled in his fists as he squinted at their surroundings, trying to match the topographical lines to the anonymous forest around them, all of which looked exactly the same to someone who didn't know how to read the subtle differences. "This is bullshit," he muttered, voice carrying frustration. "They changed the course markers. This isn't matching the terrain." One of the team members checked his watch with visible concern. "We're burning time, Sergeant. At this rate, we won't hit even one checkpoint before dark." Riggs rounded on Elara, who stood quietly observing a distant ridgeline with the focused attention of someone reading a book. "Why don't you make yourself useful? Or are you just here to watch real soldiers work?" Elara met his gaze evenly. Her voice was flat, emotionless, giving nothing away. Turn left, 300 meters. Follow the dry creek bed. Checkpoints on the north side of the lightning-struck pine. Riggs scoffed, face twisting into derision. Lightning-struck pine, right. You can see that from here, can you? With your magical woman intuition? But he had no better option, no other plan, and the clock was ticking. Reluctantly, more out of desperation than trust, he led them in the direction she'd indicated. 10 minutes later, moving through terrain that gradually shifted from pine forest to mixed hardwood, they reached the checkpoint exactly where Alara had predicted. The lightning-struck pine stood like a skeletal sentinel, its bark stripped and blackened, the checkpoint marker hanging from a branch at eye level. The team's attitude shifted imperceptibly. No one thanked her. No one acknowledged her guidance. No one admitted she'd been right and Riggs had been wrong. But the derisive comments stopped. For now. The pattern repeated at each checkpoint. Riggs would lead them astray, confidence outstripping his actual navigation ability. Ilara would quietly suggest the correct direction, voice calm and certain. They would find their target. By the time they returned to base camp, first among all the teams, ahead of groups with more experienced navigators, Riggs's earlier confidence had curdled into silent resentment. He'd been shown up by the woman he dismissed, and everyone knew it, and his ego couldn't process the discrepancy between what should have happened and what did. That evening, during equipment inspection, as the sun painted the sky orange and red, Corporal Devin Marks grabbed Ilara's rucksack from the lineup where they'd all placed their gear for review and dumped its contents onto the dirt with casual cruelty. Socks, flashlight, folded map, water purification tablets, and a weathered pocket notebook spilled across the ground in a jumble of personal equipment suddenly made public. "Let's see what Paper Thorn packs," he said, kicking at items with his boot. "Probably got makeup in here, tampons, romance novels." The other trainees crowded around, laughing as Marks held up her standard-issue water bottle like a trophy, like he'd discovered something incriminating. "Look at this. Basic issue. No customization. You buying gear at the surplus store, Thorn? Can't afford the good stuff on a captain's salary?" Ilara knelt to gather her belongings, hands steady despite the circle of men around her, despite the humiliation of having her personal effects scattered and mocked. But when Mark stepped on the notebook, grinding it into the mud with deliberate pressure and a smile that said he knew exactly what he was doing, something flickered in her eyes. Something cold and final that was gone almost before it appeared. "Oops," Mark said, voice dripping with false innocence. "Guess you'll need a new diary. Maybe write about your feelings, about how mean we all are." She picked up each item without rushing, without showing anger, wiped mud from the notebook with her sleeve, fingers gentle as if it were something precious, repacked everything into her rucksack with the same methodical care, every item in its proper place. The instructor watched from 20 feet away, but said nothing, just called for the next inspection. The message was clear. She was on her own. No one would intervene. This was her problem to solve. Marks walked away, high-fiving Kane, leaving Ilara alone in the dirt as the sun continued its descent. That night, the women's barracks was nearly empty. Only 3 female trainees had qualified for the program, and the other 2, both experienced combat veterans with their own credentials and accomplishments, kept their distance from Ilara, influenced by the prevailing attitude, unwilling to risk their own standing by association with someone marked as weak. Ilara sat on her bunk, meticulously cleaning her gear with a small cleaning kit, each piece of equipment receiving careful attention. The mud-stained notebook lay open beside her, pages filled with precise technical drawings that would have shocked anyone who saw them. Combat formations showing multiple teams in complex tactical relationships, weapons schematics with calculations for ballistic trajectories and penetration values, urban assault patterns with notes about angles of fire and civilian evacuation routes. The work wasn't that of a novice studying theory or a student taking notes. It was the accumulated knowledge of someone who had implemented these tactics in conditions where mistakes meant death, where theory met reality and reality won every time. She traced a finger over a diagram labeled Compound Infiltration, Herat Province 2012, the notation casual and precise, as if this were just another day at another compound in another war. Then quickly closed the notebook as footsteps approached down the barracks corridor, metal-tipped boots clicking on tile. Lieutenant Sarah Michaels stopped at the foot of Alara's bunk. Army intelligence, sharp features that suggested quick thinking, calculating eyes that missed nothing and forgot less. She'd been running analysis in theater for 6 years, had enough dirt on enough people to end careers with a phone call. "Nice performance today, Thorne," she said, tone making it absolutely clear it wasn't a compliment, despite the word. "Playing the long game, aren't you? Come in looking weak, let them underestimate you, then show just enough skill to make them wonder. Classic intelligence operation tradecraft." Ilara tucked the notebook into her rucksack without responding, movements unhurried. Michael's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Women like you are why the rest of us have to work twice as hard to be taken seriously, riding the diversity quota to a cushy assignment, then washing out when the real work starts, confirming every prejudice these men have about us. You're not just failing yourself, you're making it harder for every woman who comes after you." Ilara met her gaze with the same impassive expression she'd worn all day. "Is there something you need, Michaels? Just wanted you to know we see through you. This isn't some Pentagon office where you can hide behind a desk and file reports. People die when someone like you takes up a slot that should go to a real operator. When we're downrange and bullets start flying, your file won't save you. Your diversity points won't matter. And the men who died because you weren't good enough won't care about your intentions." Ilara didn't respond. She resumed organizing her gear as if Michaels had already left, as if the conversation had ended the moment the other woman finished speaking. After a moment of tense silence, Michaels walked away, boot steps echoing down the corridor. Outside the barracks window, the North Carolina mountains loomed in moonlit silhouette, vast and indifferent to human dramas. Ilara glanced at them briefly. Her expression softened for just a moment, something ancient and tired showing through the cracks, before she returned to her preparations, hands moving with practiced rhythm that spoke of thousands of repetitions, of muscle memory built in circumstances she couldn't discuss and places she couldn't name. The third day brought close-quarters battle drills in the kill house, a multi-level structure designed to simulate clearing hostile buildings, live ammunition, live explosives. Mistakes didn't result in failed grades. They resulted in casualties, training rounds or not. The class was divided into assault teams. Kane was designated red team leader, chest puffing with self-importance as he gathered his element of 8 men, all of whom he'd carefully selected based on reputation and performance. Ilara was assigned to blue team as rear security, the position typically given to those considered least combat effective, the spot where someone could do minimum harm if they froze or panicked. "She's going to get us all killed from behind," Kane announced when assignments were posted, voice carrying to ensure everyone heard his assessment. "Probably shoot us in the back when things get confusing." Blue team members weren't thrilled either. A Spanish naval special warfare operator named Vargas muttered to his buddy, voice intentionally loud, "Perfect. We're stuck with the secretary. Maybe she can file a report while we're getting shot." The scenario controller handed Ilara a clipboard with tactical frequencies and team rosters. "Don't screw this up, Captain. Blue team's already at a disadvantage with numbers. Can't afford dead weight." The simulation began with the wail of alarms that would have signaled incoming attack in a real compound. Red team moved aggressively from their starting position, using their superior numbers and Kane's competent leadership to pin Blue's forward elements in a deadly crossfire within the first 2 minutes. The trainees wore laser tag gear that registered hits, and within minutes, Blue team soldiers were being marked as casualties, their vests lighting up with the system's kill indicators in bright red that said, "You're dead, you failed." In the command post, a small room with video feeds from cameras throughout the kill house, Ilara marked positions on the tactical map with red grease pencil, tracking both teams' movements. Her movements were quick but composed, showing no sign of the panic that should have been setting in as Blue Team was systematically eliminated. While others might have panicked at the rapid deterioration of their tactical position, started screaming orders or freezing in indecision, Ilara's breathing remained even, hands steady, eyes tracking patterns in the chaos. She spoke into the radio, voice steady and authoritative in a way the others hadn't heard before, each word precise and carrying absolute certainty. Alpha Squad, pull back to East Corridor. Bravo, flank north through the stairwell. Charlie, hold the fountain courtyard. Execute now. Blue's field commander, a Norwegian special operations officer with a blonde buzz cut and 15 years of experience, hesitated. The tactical display showed their forces being systematically eliminated, the red team pushing forward with overwhelming momentum. Standard tactics said, consolidate, defend, try to hold what you had. That's suicide, Captain. We need to consolidate forces, not— Trust me, Ilara interrupted, voice carrying steel-edged certainty that permitted no argument, that bypassed rank and experience and spoke directly to something deeper. Execute now. Something in her tone, the absolute confidence, the suggestion of knowledge beyond what her file should contain, made the Norwegian nod slowly. Do it. All elements, execute Captain's orders. What followed was a master class in tactical deception that would be studied in after-action reviews for months. Ilara had recognized a pattern in Red Team's movements during the first 2 minutes, a pattern Kane probably didn't even realize he was following. He was aggressive but predictable, overly reliant on his numerical advantage, pushing forward without adequate flank security because he assumed Blue Team was already broken. By conceding territory in a controlled withdrawal, Ilara created the illusion of Blue Team collapse, letting Kane think his aggressive push was working. While he was focused on the apparent victory in the center, she was maneuvering units into his blind spots through secondary corridors he'd ignored, setting up a classic pincer movement using the building's architecture against him. 3 minutes later, it was over. Alpha Squad, having withdrawn to the East Corridor, suddenly reversed and came through a connecting passage Kane had forgotten existed, catching his main force in a devastating crossfire. Bravo, having flanked north through the stairwell, swept down from the second level, cutting off Red Team's retreat route. Charlie, holding the fountain courtyard, prevented reinforcements from stabilizing Red's collapsing position. Red Team was wiped out with surgical precision, their vests flashing in defeat. Kane standing in the central kill house courtyard with the expression of a man who couldn't quite process how victory had turned to utter defeat in 30 seconds. Blue Team erupted in cheers, backs slapping and high-fiving, adrenaline and relief flooding through them. The Norwegian commander approached Ilara, his earlier skepticism replaced with something approaching genuine respect, maybe even awe. "Where'd you learn that?" he asked, studying her with new eyes. "That wasn't textbook tactics, that was field experience." Ilara set the clipboard down, expression unchanging, giving nothing away. Practice, lots of practice. During the debrief, the scenario controller pulled up simulation data on the main screen, showing every move, every decision, every tactical adjustment. The data showed a 98% mission success rate with 0 friendly casualties, numbers that even the instructors rarely achieved in demonstrations, numbers that suggested a level of tactical sophistication that shouldn't exist in someone with Ilara's file. The room fell silent as the controller scrolled through the analytics, each chart and graph telling a story of near-perfect tactical execution. The controller looked at Ilara, his professional demeanor cracking just enough to reveal genuine surprise, maybe even suspicion. "I've only seen this kind of precision once before," he said, voice trailing off as if he'd started to say something else and thought better of it. His eyes dropped to Alara's wrist, where her sleeve had ridden up slightly during the debrief. The broken sword tattoo was partially visible now, faded blue-gray ink catching the fluorescent light. 7 horizontal lines beneath the shattered blade. The controller's face went pale, his mouth opened slightly. He looked like he'd seen a ghost, like someone had just walked into the room who should have been dead and buried years ago. In the back of the room, Colonel Marshall Graves had entered during Alara's presentation. Now he stood frozen, staring at that tattoo with an expression that cycled through shock, recognition, and something that looked almost like grief mixed with hope. His hand moved unconsciously to his own wrist, hidden beneath his uniform cuff, as if checking for something that might or might not be there. The moment stretched, pregnant with implications that the watching trainees couldn't understand, but could feel like static electricity before a storm. "Dismissed," Graves said abruptly, voice rough and strained. "Review your tactical manuals before tomorrow's exercise. Class dismissed immediately." The trainees filed out, confused by the sudden dismissal, by the tension that had suddenly filled the room like smoke. Kane shot Alara a look that promised this wasn't over, that her success had just painted an even bigger target on her back. But most of the class was silent now, wheels turning, recalculating their assessment. Alara gathered her materials with the same methodical care she brought to everything, aware of Graves watching her with an intensity that felt like physical pressure, like hands on her shoulders. When she looked up, their eyes met across the briefing room. For 3 heartbeats, neither moved. The air between them seemed to crystallize, heavy with recognition and questions and shared knowledge that couldn't be voiced. Then Graves turned and walked out, his usual perfect posture slightly stooped, as if he'd just received news that fundamentally changed everything he thought he knew. But Alara had seen it in his eyes, the recognition, the knowledge, the understanding. Someone knew what that tattoo meant. Someone knew who she really was, and that meant everything was about to change. That night, Alara waited until the barracks had fallen silent, her fellow trainees deep in the exhausted sleep of people who'd pushed their bodies to the limit. She slipped from her bunk with the silence of long practice and moved to the window, checking to ensure the area was clear, scanning for any observers or security patrols that might notice her movements. From a hidden compartment in her boot heel, a space that wouldn't be found in any normal inspection, she removed a small, encrypted phone that wouldn't appear in any official inventory, that couldn't be traced through normal channels. She typed a brief message with practiced efficiency. "Compromised. Graves knows. Advise." The response came seconds later, as if someone had been waiting for her contact. "Maintain cover. Await contact. Do not initiate." Alara deleted both messages with practiced motions, the phone's security protocols ensuring nothing remained in memory. She returned the device to its hiding place and stood by the window for several minutes, face illuminated by moonlight, revealing an expression she never showed during daylight. Profound weariness, mixed with something that looked almost like grief, the mask finally slipping when no one could see. Across the compound, in his private quarters in officer housing, Marshal Graves sat at a desk cluttered with files and documents accumulated over decades of service. A black and white photograph lay before him, a team of soldiers in desert camouflage, their faces purposely blurred for operational security in the way truly classified units blurred their photos. Except for one face, one female operator whose features were clear, whose identity was supposedly known and cleared. And on her exposed wrist, clearly visible in the photograph, was a broken sword tattoo with 7 lines beneath it. Graves picked up a secure phone with a scrambled line that bounced through 3 satellites and dialed a number from memory, one he'd called perhaps a dozen times in 10 years. "It's me," he said when the call connected, when the click indicated the encryption had engaged. "She's here. Warrior 26 from Echo Company, at Fort Bragg, in my training program." A long pause, as he listened to the voice on the other end, a voice that spoke with the authority of someone very high in the chain of command. Yes, I'm absolutely certain. The tattoo matches. The tactical signature matches. The skill level is exactly what we'd expect. It's her. Another pause, longer this time. Understood. I'll make contact when the time is right, when we can ensure secure communication. But sir, if she's here, if she's surfaced after all this time, it means she's made her move. It means the mission is active again. And that means he stopped, listening, his weathered face growing grim. Yes, sir, I understand. Graves out. He ended the call and opened a file folder labeled Operation Nightshade, Classified, Eyes Only. The classification level was so high it shouldn't have existed outside of a vault. Yet here it was in his quarters, testament to how far outside normal channels this had always operated. Inside was a single page containing a list of names, most crossed out in red marker with dates beside them. Dates of death, dates of elimination, dates when the mission had ended for those warriors. Near the bottom, one name remained unmarked, the only one without a red line through it. Thorn, E/Warrior26/status, unknown. Graves pulled out a pen and after a moment's hesitation, drew a single line under the name instead of through it. Not dead, not lost, but found. Active, present. He closed the file and placed it back in his safe, spinning the combination lock, securing secrets that had remained buried for over a decade. Outside, the North Carolina night pressed cold against the windows. Stars brilliant above the training grounds where tomorrow's warriors slept, unaware that one among them carried secrets that could shake the foundations of everything they believed about honor, duty, and the chain of command. In the women's barracks, Elara Thorne lay awake, eyes fixed on the ceiling, listening to the breathing of women who'd rejected her, waiting for whatever would come next. A soldier prepared for a battle only she knew was approaching. The broken sword on her wrist seemed to pulse in the darkness, 7 lines marking 7 promises made to warriors who would never come home. Promises carved into her flesh as a reminder of debts that could only be paid in blood and truth. Promises she intended to keep, no matter the cost, no matter who had to burn to make it right. Dawn broke over Fort Bragg with blood-red streaks across the horizon, the kind of sky old soldiers called an omen, a warning from the universe that violence was coming and smart men prepared for it. Elara was already completing her 5th mile on the empty track when the first instructors arrived to prepare for the day's training, their vehicles crunching across gravel in the pre-dawn darkness that was just beginning to yield to gray light. She ran with the same mechanical precision that characterized everything she did. Efficient, controlled, purpose-driven. Not the desperate running of someone trying to prove something, but the methodical conditioning of someone who understood that physical capability was just another weapon in the arsenal, one that needed constant maintenance like any other tool of violence. Colonel Marshall Graves watched from the sidelines, coffee steaming in his hand, his weathered face unreadable in the half-light. When Elara finished her final lap and began her cool-down walk, he fell into step beside her with the casual ease of someone who'd made this exact approach 1,000 times in his career. Timing and positioning suggesting this encounter wasn't accidental. "You're up early, Captain," he observed, voice casual but eyes watchful, studying her face for reactions, for tells. "You run like you're maintaining operational readiness, like you expect to need that conditioning for something specific." "I like the quiet, sir," Elara replied, voice neutral, giving nothing away. Graves nodded as if this confirmed something he'd suspected. The silence stretched between them, filled only by the rhythm of their footsteps on the track's rubberized surface and the distant sound of the bass coming to life around them. Engines starting, voices calling, the machinery of military routine grinding into motion. "I've been reviewing files," Graves said after they'd completed half a lap in silence. "Yours is particularly interesting reading." 28 years old. 10 years of service, multiple classified deployments to locations that aren't specified. Excellent performance reviews across the board, but no commendations, no distinguished service medals, nothing that would make you stand out in a crowd. It's almost like someone designed the perfect, unremarkable career, something that would pass inspection, but never draw attention. Elara said nothing, but a nearly imperceptible tension crept into her shoulders, muscles tightening fractionally in a way that suggested preparation for action. Almost too perfect, wouldn't you say? Graves stopped walking, forcing Elara to either stop or appear insubordinate by continuing. She stopped, like someone spent considerable time and effort crafting a legend that would hold up under standard scrutiny, but would collapse under the kind of examination someone with my resources and experience could bring to bear. Is there a question in there, sir? Graves's voice dropped lower, quiet enough that no one else could have heard, even if there had been anyone else on the track. Who are you really, Captain Thorne? Because I've been doing this long enough to recognize when something doesn't add up, when the surface story doesn't match the underlying reality. For a moment, something flickered behind Elara's carefully composed expression, something cold and assessing that didn't belong on the face of a mere paper soldier, something that suggested depths of experience and capability that her file explicitly denied. Then it was gone, replaced by the blank professionalism she always displayed. I'm exactly who my file says I am, sir. Nothing more, nothing less. Graves held her gaze a moment longer, his own eyes revealing nothing of whatever calculations were running behind them. Then he nodded once, a gesture that could have meant acceptance or dismissal, or something else entirely. Carry on, Captain. He walked away, leaving Elara alone on the track. The rising sun cast her elongated shadow across the empty field, a dark silhouette that stretched toward the mountains beyond Fort Bragg's boundaries, toward terrain that would soon become very relevant to her future. 3 hours later, the entire training cadre assembled in the main briefing room with an urgency that suggested something had changed overnight, that the training schedule had been disrupted by reality intruding on carefully laid plans. The tension was palpable, different from the usual pre-exercise energy. Something fundamental had shifted while they slept. Colonel Graves stood at the podium, his expression harder than usual, carved from granite and old anger. Behind him, tactical displays showed satellite imagery of desert terrain, Arizona-Mexico border region, compound structures in isolated areas, topographical maps marked with classifications that suggested this was recent intelligence from active sources. Listen up, Graves commanded, and the room fell silent instantly with the kind of immediate obedience that only truly respected commanders received. We have a situation developing in real time. 12 hours ago, Senator Victoria Whitmore was kidnapped from a campaign fundraising event in Tucson, Arizona. Intelligence from multiple sources confirms cartel involvement, though the sophistication of the operation suggests resources beyond what typical cartel elements possess. The senator is chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee, which makes this not just a kidnapping, but a matter of national security at the highest level. The display changed, showing grainy surveillance footage of a woman in her early 60s being forced into a vehicle by armed men wearing tactical gear that looked more military than criminal, their movements coordinated in ways that suggested professional training. Current intelligence places the senator at a compound approximately 15 miles north of the Mexican border in a remote area of Arizona desert. Analysis suggests the hostage takers will attempt to transfer her across the border within the next 36 hours, after which point retrieval becomes exponentially more complicated due to jurisdictional issues and the protection such elements receive from certain Mexican authorities. Once she's in Mexico, diplomatic and political considerations make a rescue operation essentially impossible. He let that sink in, watching the trainees process the implications of a live mission, of theory about to become reality in a way that could get people killed. Team Phantom has been selected for the rescue operation. This is not an exercise, gentlemen. This is a live mission with live ammunition against a live enemy who will absolutely kill you if given the opportunity. Failure is not an option, because failure means a United States senator dies on foreign soil or in the hands of criminals, and the geopolitical implications of that outcome are unacceptable at every level. The room erupted in contained chaos, excited murmurs, fists bumping, the electric charge that runs through warriors when training becomes real, when all the preparation suddenly has stakes that matter beyond grades and reputation. "Captain Thorne," Graves said, cutting through the noise like a blade through silk, "you'll have tactical command of this operation." The room went silent. Absolutely, completely silent. The kind of silence that follows a bomb detonation, when everyone's ears are ringing and their brains are trying to process something that doesn't make sense. Kane half rose from his seat, face flushing red with anger and disbelief. "Sir, with all due respect, did I ask for your input, Lieutenant?" Graves's voice could have frozen nitrogen solid. "Did I indicate that I was interested in your opinion on command assignments?" Kane sat down, jaw clenched so hard his teeth must have been grinding, hands gripping the arms of his chair with white-knuckled intensity. "Captain Thorne demonstrated superior tactical judgment during the Kill House exercise," Graves continued, voice allowing no argument. "She will command this operation. Lieutenant Kane, you'll serve as second in command and handle operational logistics and support. Master Chief Lawson will coordinate fire support and overwatch elements. Any other questions about the chain of command?" No one spoke, but the temperature in the room had dropped 20 degrees, the air thick with resentment and confusion. "Good. Mission brief begins in 30 minutes. Gear up and be ready to deploy in 6 hours. Wheels up at 1400 hours. Dismissed." As the trainees filed out in tense silence, Ilara remained seated, waiting until the room cleared. Graves approached her, his expression carefully neutral, revealing nothing of whatever thoughts churned behind those ice-blue eyes. "Walk with me, Captain," he said quietly. They exited through a side door that led to an unused section of the base. Old warehouses from the Cold War era, structures built to house equipment and supplies for a conflict that never came, now mostly empty except for the ghosts of old tensions and older fears. When Graves was certain they were alone, beyond any electronic surveillance or curious ears, he stopped and turned to face her. "This mission is wrong," he said bluntly, voice low but carrying absolute conviction. "Every instinct I've developed over 30 years tells me something doesn't add up." Ilara's eyes narrowed fractionally, the first real reaction she'd shown. "Sir, the timeline's too tight. Professional kidnapping operation, and we get actionable intelligence within 12 hours? That never happens in the real world. In reality, hostage situations take days or weeks to develop solid intel, to build sources, to confirm locations. This is too clean, too convenient, and the fact that Team Phantom, a training unit with no operational deployment history, gets assigned a live Senator rescue instead of Delta or DevGru, or any of the units that actually specialize in this?" He shook his head. "That's not how things work unless someone very high up the chain is manipulating the process." "What are you saying, sir?" Graves pulled a small, ruggedized tablet from his jacket, tapped a few commands with practiced efficiency, and handed it to her. The screen showed classified intelligence feeds with source codes and distribution chains that Ilara recognized immediately as being above even her clearance level. The kind of information that shouldn't be accessible outside of secure facilities. "I've been doing this long enough to know when something smells wrong," Graves said, voice carrying the weight of decades of experience reading between the lines of official narratives. "So I did some digging through channels I'm not supposed to have access to anymore, calling in favors from people who owe me their careers or their lives. This entire operation was greenlit by someone very high up the chain, someone with enough authority to bypass normal approval processes, someone who specifically requested Team Phantom for this mission. Someone who specifically requested you as tactical commander. Ilara scrolled through the data on the tablet, her expression hardening with each line of text, each revelation of manipulation in orchestrated events. General Richard Keller. You know him? Graves asked, studying her face intently. I know of him. Ilara's voice was flat, emotionless, but her knuckles had gone white around the tablet's edge, the only visible sign of the rage she was suppressing. I know what he's capable of doing to people who get in his way. Graves studied her carefully, seeing past the mask to whatever truths she was keeping locked away. That tattoo on your wrist, I recognized it yesterday during the Kill House debrief. Broken sword with 7 lines beneath the break. That's Echo Company designation, the unit marking for operators in a program that officially never existed. I commanded special operations in this theater during the Syrian intervention period. Echo Company was under my purview until the program got transferred to Keller's authority in early 2012. Ilara said nothing, but she'd stopped breathing, body absolutely still in a way that suggested either total calm or total preparation for violence. Echo Company was lost in a classified operation that same year, Graves continued, voice roughening with emotion he couldn't quite suppress. 20 elite operators, the absolute best we had from every branch. Complete unit loss during a mission that went catastrophically wrong. Bodies never recovered due to structural collapse at the target site. Official story was a mission compromise followed by catastrophic structural failure during extraction. But I never believed it because the timeline was wrong, the after-action reports were too sanitized, too clean, and General Keller, who'd taken operational control just weeks before the disaster, got promoted to Brigadier General 6 months after Echo Company died. Why are you telling me this, sir? Ilara's voice was barely above a whisper. Graves's voice roughened with barely contained emotion, with 11 years of grief and rage that he'd kept professional and buried, but never truly processed. Because my son was Warrior 17, Captain Derek Graves, 29 years old, Delta Force, best tactical mind I've ever seen in 30 years of evaluating warriors. They told me he died in a training accident at a classified location, classified circumstances. Wouldn't let me see his body, wouldn't let me attend any kind of service, just handed me a folded flag and a bullshit story about him serving his country with honor and distinction. Ilara met his eyes, and for the first time since arriving at Fort Bragg, her mask cracked completely, revealing the person underneath, scarred, damaged, carrying burdens that would have crushed most people. Derek was a good man, sir, a good warrior. He deserved better than what happened to all of us. The air between them crystallized with shared understanding, with the recognition that everything that had seemed like coincidence was actually carefully orchestrated connection. So you are Warrior 26, Graves said, voice catching slightly. The ghost, the one who survived when everyone else died. Barely survived, sir. Ilara's voice was raw now, no longer the controlled monotone she'd maintained for days. The compound was rigged with enough explosives to level a city block. Keller gave the order to sanitize the site while we were still inside, while we were completing the mission he'd sent us to accomplish. 19 of us died in the explosions, died following orders from a commander who decided we were more valuable dead than alive. I only survived because I was in a lower tunnel section when the charges went off. Took me 2 years in a Turkish hospital to remember my own name. Another year to piece together what really happened, to understand that we'd been deliberately murdered by our own command. And now you're here. Now I'm here, Ilara confirmed, voice steadying as she retreated back behind her professional mask. Because Keller's not done. He's still running his shadow program, still using operators as disposable assets for operations that will never appear in any official record. And this mission, she gestured at the tablet, this mission is a trap designed specifically to eliminate me and anyone I might have told about what happened in Syria. Graves nodded slowly, his own suspicions confirmed. I came to the same conclusion when I saw the mission parameters. The question is what we do about it. I could scrub the mission, pull rank, cite operational concerns that make this too risky, and Keller would just set another trap, one you might not see coming, Ilara finished. One where I wouldn't have allies or warning. No, sir. We go forward. But we go forward smart, with our eyes open, in a contingency plan that doesn't end with me buried in the Arizona desert and Echo Company's truth dying with me. He pulled out his encrypted phone and showed Ilara a complex file structure containing thousands of documents organized with meticulous care. Everything I've compiled on Keller over the past 11 years. Evidence of corruption, illegal operations, financial irregularities, connections to defense contractors that cross every ethics line. Not enough to bring him down on its own. He's too well protected, has too many allies in positions of power, but enough to cause serious problems if it goes public at the right moment. Insurance, Ilara said, understanding immediately. Exactly. You go into Arizona, you execute this mission. But if I don't hear from you within 6 hours of mission completion, this entire package uploads automatically to every media outlet, every congressional oversight committee, every inspector general office I can reach. Keller can try to bury one rogue operator with a convenient story. He can't bury a coordinated information release from multiple sources that implicates him in a decade of criminal activity and puts his name in headlines he can't control. Ilara studied the older man, seeing past the colonel's insignia to the grieving father beneath, understanding that this had never been about regulations or proper procedure. This was personal for both of them. Her fighting for justice for her dead teammates, him fighting for justice for his murdered son. You've been planning this for a long time, sir. 11 years, Graves confirmed, voice thick with emotion he no longer tried to hide. Since the day they told me my son was dead, and I couldn't ask questions without being told it was classified, without being reminded that some things were beyond my clearance, even as his father. You're not the only one who wants justice for Echo Company, Captain. You're just the only one who survived long enough to be the weapon that delivers it. Then we finish it together, sir. They shook hands, the grip firm and lasting, the handshake of two warriors who understood that the mission ahead would likely end in death or court-martial, that they were committing to a course of action that would destroy their careers at minimum and possibly their lives. But that some battles had to be fought regardless of the odds, regardless of the cost, because the alternative was living with compromises that would poison everything they'd ever believed about honor and duty. 6 hours later, Team Phantom loaded onto a C-130 transport at Pope Army Airfield, adjacent to Fort Bragg. The aircraft's interior was all exposed ribs and webbing, the smell of hydraulic fluid and sweat, and the particular odor of nervous men preparing for violence. 12 operators plus support personnel, each man checking weapons and gear with the ritualistic precision that preceded violence, running through mental checklists built from years of experience and training. Ilara sat near the rear ramp, M4 carbine between her knees, reviewing satellite imagery on a ruggedized tablet that showed the target compound from multiple angles. Master Chief Garrett Lawson settled his considerable bulk beside her, the jump seat creaking under his weight, carrying an M110 sniper rifle that had accounted for 43 confirmed kills across 3 deployments. "First time leading live op, Captain?" he asked, voice just loud enough to carry over the engine's roar, but not loud enough to be overheard by the others. "No, Master Chief," Ilara replied, and something in that simple 2-word answer made Lawson look at her more carefully, seeing details he'd missed before in his rush to judgment. "Right," he said slowly. "Well, for what it's worth, the boys are coming around after that Kill House performance. That was some next-level tactical thinking. Still calling you Paper Thorn, but now it's almost affectionate." Kane approached from the forward section, moving with the easy balance of someone who'd logged thousands of hours in aircraft. He dropped into the seat across from Ilara, unrolling a tactical map. "We need to talk about the approach vector," he said without preamble. "Current plan has us inserting 2 kilometers north of the target. I'm recommending we adjust to 3 kilometers east. Use the ridgeline for concealment." Ilara studied the map carefully. Kane's suggestion made tactical sense on the surface. Better cover, harder for the enemy to detect their approach. But it also added 30 minutes to their movement time. "We stay with the original plan," she said, voice firm. "Speed is more important than perfect concealment. The longer we're in the field, the more chance of compromise." Kane's jaw tightened. "With respect, Captain, I've got 12 years of operational experience. The Eastern approach is sound tactics. And I've got reasons for my decision that you're not cleared to know about, Lieutenant. We use the Northern approach." For a moment, Kane looked like he might push back harder. Then something shifted in his eyes, a flicker of calculation that Ilara caught and filed away for later consideration. "Understood, Captain," he said, voice neutral. He rolled up the map and returned to his seat. Lawson waited until Kane was out of earshot. "You don't trust him." "I don't trust anyone on this mission, Master Chief. Present company very much included." The C-130 began its descent into Arizona airspace as twilight painted the desert in shades of purple and gold. Through the small windows, Ilara could see mountains giving way to flat scrubland, the kind of terrain that looked empty but could hide an army. The loadmaster gave the 10-minute warning. Operators stood as one, checking each other's gear in the final ritual before insertion. Ilara felt hands checking her vest straps, her weapons retention systems, her radio placement. Anonymous assistance from warriors who might not respect her, but understood that in combat, everyone's survival depended on everyone else's readiness. The ramp dropped with a hydraulic whine, revealing the Arizona desert rushing past at 130 knots. Hot air blasted into the cargo bay like opening an oven door, carrying the smell of creosote and dust. "1 minute," the loadmaster shouted. Ilara moved to the ramp, first in the stick as befitted her command position. Behind her, Team Phantom formed up in perfect order, 12 warriors about to jump into darkness over hostile territory. The light turned green. "Go, go, go!" Ilara threw herself into the slipstream without hesitation, the desert spinning beneath her as the static line deployed her parachute with violent efficiency. The opening shock was brutal, harness straps digging into her shoulders and thighs. Then she was under canopy, the C-130 thundering away into the distance. Below, the desert waited. Somewhere in that emptiness was a trap designed specifically to kill her and everyone with her. She pulled her risers, steering toward the designated landing zone, and allowed herself one moment of absolute clarity about what was coming. This was it, the endgame that had been building since she'd crawled out of those Syrian ruins. Either she would expose Keller and get justice for Echo Company, or she would die trying. The broken sword tattoo on her wrist seemed to burn beneath her uniform in the fading light. Tonight, she would start keeping those 7 promises. The desert rushed up to meet her, and Ilara Thorne prepared for war. Team Phantom regrouped in a shallow wadi 300 meters from the landing zone. Ilara counted, 12 operators, all accounted for, no injuries. "Comms check," she whispered into her radio. One by one, the team called in. Clear signals, no interference. "Master Chief, get the drone up. I want eyes on the target before we move." Lawson assembled the compact reconnaissance drone with practiced efficiency. 30 seconds later, the device climbed silently into the night sky, its thermal and optical cameras feeding encrypted data back to Ilara's tablet. What she saw made her blood run cold. The compound was exactly where intelligence had indicated, a sprawling ranch structure with multiple outbuildings. But instead of the 15 to 20 cartel members the brief had promised, thermal imaging showed at least 40 armed personnel. And their deployment wasn't the sloppy perimeter security of criminals. This was the precise positioning of military professionals who understood fields of fire, overlapping coverage, and defensive depth. "That's not cartel," Lawson muttered, looking over her shoulder at the feed. That's a professional security force. See how they're positioned? Interlocking fields of fire, clear sight lines. These guys know what they're doing. Ilara zoomed the camera, focusing on individual heat signatures and the weapons profiles they carried. Not AK-47s and civilian AR-15. These were military-grade platforms with suppressors and optics. M4, SCAR rifles, squad automatic weapons. Lieutenant Kane, she called softly into the radio. Kane moved up from his position. When he saw the drone feed on Ilara's tablet, his face went carefully blank. The expression of someone seeing exactly what they expected, but hadn't wanted confirmed. "This doesn't match the intel brief," he said after a long moment. "No, it doesn't." Ilara watched his eyes carefully. "Your recommendation, Lieutenant? We need to call for extract and reassess the entire operation. The force ratio is completely wrong. We're 12 operators against 40-plus hostiles in a fortified position. That's not a rescue operation by any tactical standard. That's suicide." Everything Kane said made perfect tactical sense. Standard operating procedure said, abort, reassess, plan a new approach. But Ilara had seen the micro-expression that flashed across his face when he first looked at the drone feed. Not surprise, not shock, recognition. He'd known, or at least suspected, that this was what they'd find here. "We're proceeding with the mission," Ilara said, voice carrying absolute finality. Kane's head snapped toward her. "Captain, that's—" "A direct order, Lieutenant." She turned to address the full team. "Intel was wrong about enemy strength. We're looking at 4-to-1 odds minimum, professional military contractors with good defensive positions. Anyone who wants to pull back to the rally point and wait for extract, I understand. No judgment, no questions asked. But I'm going in to complete this mission." Silence stretched across the wadi. The team exchanged glances, weighing survival instincts against warrior pride. Master Chief Lawson was first to speak. "I'm with you, Captain. Let's go get our senator." One by one, the others signaled assent. Even Kane, though his expression suggested he was calculating angles Ilara couldn't see. "All right," Ilara said, pulling up the compound schematics. "We split into 3 elements. Master Chief, you take overwatch with Corporal Wolf and the long guns. Find high ground with clear sight lines to the main structure." Lawson nodded. "Element 2 with Lieutenant Kane holds the northern perimeter. You're our emergency exfil route." Kane's expression was unreadable, but he acknowledged with a curt nod. "Element 3 with me infiltrates via the drainage system on the south side. There's an underground level, probably where they're holding the senator. We go in fast and quiet, locate the package, extract via the route Element 2 secures." Questions? "Rules of engagement," someone asked. "Weapons free on anyone showing hostile intent, but positive identification before you shoot." Some of these contractors might not know what they're really part of. The team moved out in near-perfect silence, 3 elements flowing through the desert darkness. Ilara led her 5-man element toward the southern approach, moving through terrain that provided minimal cover, every sense heightened by adrenaline and training. They reached the drainage culvert exactly where the plans indicated. Ilara clicked her infrared light, illuminating the passage ahead. "Wolf, you're on point." "I'm right behind you." Corporal Iris Wolf took point without hesitation. 26 years old, compact and fast, she moved into the tunnel with her weapon up and ready. The culvert smelled of rust and stagnant water. They moved in single file, each operator maintaining contact with the one ahead by touch. No radio traffic this close to the objective. 50 meters in, Wolf's hands shot up in the signal for immediate freeze. Ilara moved up beside her. A junction box on the culvert wall, modern electronics that didn't belong, motion sensor tied to an alarm system. She examined it carefully. There was a gap in its coverage, maybe 8 inches at floor level. They could squeeze through one at a time. She went first, the sensor's invisible beam passing inches above her back. The others followed. 5 minutes to move 10 feet, but they made it through undetected. The covert opened into a larger chamber with a ladder leading up. Ilara checked her tablet, confirming their position. They were directly beneath the main structure now. She climbed the ladder, tested the access hatch at the top. Locked, but the mechanism was old. She pulled a pry bar from her kit and applied pressure. Metal shrieked softly, then gave way. She pushed the hatch open slowly, weapon up, clearing the space above. An equipment room, empty except for HVAC machinery. They were inside. The easy part was over. Her radio crackled with Master Chief Lawson's voice. Overwatch in position. Captain, you need to see this. Sending feed now. Her tablet updated with the thermal feed from Lawson's position. What she saw made her stomach drop. The basement level showed unusual thermal blooms. Not human bodies, equipment, lots of it. And at the center, a heat signature unlike anything natural. A perfect sphere of electromagnetic interference, causing the thermal imaging to distort and swirl. Master Chief, Ilara whispered, her mouth suddenly dry. What am I looking at? Lawson's response was grim. Unless I'm very wrong, Captain, that's a Scythian device. And based on these readings, it's active and warming up for operation. The world seemed to contract around Ilara. The Scythian device. Here, now, active. This wasn't just a trap. This was a field test. Keller was going to activate the device with Team Phantom in its broadcast radius, take control of her people, and eliminate everyone who knew the truth about Echo Company. And there wasn't a damn thing she could do to stop it, because they were already inside the kill zone. All elements hold position, she whispered into her radio. Do not advance. We have a significant change in the tactical situation. Kane's voice came back immediately. Captain, the senator is secondary, Ilara said, each word precise and heavy. The primary objective down there is a weapons system called a Scythian device. It uses electromagnetic pulses to override neural pathways, essentially remote mind control. Echo Company was destroyed in Syria 11 years ago because we discovered this technology and were planning to report it. General Keller ordered our elimination to protect the program. Sharp intakes of breath over the radio. I'm Warrior 26 from Echo Company, the only survivor. This entire operation is a trap designed to field test an upgraded version and eliminate me and anyone I might have told about Syria. Kane's voice came through, strangely calm. How do you know all this, Captain? Because I've seen it before. I watched it turn trained operators into puppets, and I barely survived the last time someone activated one of these things. Lawson, we have 10 minutes to reach that device and neutralize it. Element 3, we're moving now. Captain Thorne, Kane's voice cut through her orders, sharp and urgent. I need to tell you something before we go any further. The tone made Ilara's blood run cold. What is it, Lieutenant? My real name is Darius Kane, that much was true. But my brother, my younger brother, his name was Kyle Kane, Sergeant Kyle Kane. He was Warrior 12 in Echo Company. He died in Syria in the same operation that killed Colonel Graves' son. The silence over the radio was absolute. He died in the explosion, Kane continued, voice rough with emotion. They told my family it was a training accident. I've been investigating his death for 4 years, Captain. Infiltrated Artemis. Every bit of harassment, every challenge to your authority, it was all maintaining deep cover. I couldn't risk Keller's people knowing I was anything but hostile toward you. Kane, Ilara started, but he cut her off. I recognized the tattoo the first day you arrived. Spent 3 years studying every detail of Echo Company. I knew if any of the 20 survived, they'd have that broken sword marking. I've been waiting for you to surface, Captain, waiting for the chance to finish what my brother started. Why didn't you make contact earlier? Because I needed to be sure, and because the moment I broke cover, Keller would know. This mission, this trap, it's the endgame for both of us. Ilara processed this with the cold calculation that had kept her alive. Kane's story aligned with his behavior patterns. Element 2, what's your current position? Northern perimeter, 80 meters from structure. Good cover, positioned to provide suppressing fire or emergency extraction. Stay there. When this goes loud, create a distraction big enough to pull contractor focus away from our position. Understood. Captain, finish it. For Kyle, for Derek Graves, for all 19 of them who never came home. That's always been the plan. Ilara signaled her element forward. They moved through the compound's lower level like shadows, clearing rooms with mechanical precision. They reached a reinforced door marked Authorized Personnel Only. Beyond it, stairs descended into deeper darkness. She stacked her team at the door. Wolf would go left, Ilara right. 3, 2, 1. Ilara kicked the door open and flowed through. The stairwell was narrow, harsh fluorescent lights. The first guard died without knowing, Ilara's suppressed round to forehead. The second guard managed to raise his weapon before Wolf put 2 through his chest. They descended quickly. At the bottom, another door with electronic lock glowing red. Ilara attached bypass device. 30 seconds. 45. A minute. Come on! Lock flashed green. The door opened onto nightmare from Ilara's memories. The underground chamber was 50 feet across. Walls covered in geometric symbols that hurt to see. The same symbols from Syria, older than civilization. The Scythian device sat on raised platform surrounded by modern electronics. 2 feet diameter, metallic surface with shifting patterns. It pulsed faint blue-white light that made her teeth ache. And strapped to chair 15 feet away was Senator Victoria Whitmore. "Help me," the senator gasped. "Please, before the device activates? Before Keller completes his demonstration." Whitmore's face crumpled. "You know. I know you're not really hostage. Are you willing participant or pawn?" "Blackmail. He has evidence that would destroy my career. Said I just had to play along. I didn't know." She gestured at device. "What is that?" "Proof your government develops weapons violating every treaty we claim to uphold." Wolf checked restraints. "These are real, military-grade zip ties." "Cut her loose." "Senator, when was activation scheduled?" They didn't say exact timing, but the man said test begins when all assets in position. Meaning my team, any minute now. The chamber's speakers crackled. A voice filled the space, cultured, authoritative, arrogant. "Captain Thorne, or should I say Warrior 26? Welcome to the final chapter of a story that should have ended 11 years ago. General Richard Keller." "I'm here, Keller. Want to explain why you murdered 19 soldiers?" "Murdered?" Such dramatic language. "I made difficult command decision to protect strategic asset of incalculable value." "Mind control you plan for American citizens?" "The evolution of warfare itself. Imagine neutralizing enemy forces without firing shot, converting hostile populations to compliant allies, ensuring absolute loyalty from troops, creating slaves." Semantics. The device is tool, morally neutral. What matters is who wields it. And you think you're qualified? I'm the only one with vision to deploy it properly, which is why I can't allow you to survive. Nothing personal, operational necessity. The device's pulsing intensified. Blue-white light grew brighter. Ilara felt pressure building behind eyes, precursor to activation she remembered from Syria. "Wolf, get Senator out. Now." Wolf cut restraints and pulled Whitmore toward stairs. "Captain," a team member called, "I'm feeling something. Pressure in head, vision blurring. Fight it. Focus on breathing, physical sensations." She had maybe a minute before her team turned into enemies. The broadcast amplifiers connected via fiber optic cables to central sphere. Sever those and range would collapse, but cables were armored. "Master Chief, I need precision fire on my position. Target fiber optic connections at broadcast tower base." "Captain, you're standing right next to those connections." "Do it. That's an order." 30 seconds for ranging. Device pulsing reached steady rhythm. Two team members dropped to knees, clutching heads. "Captain, I can hear voices. Instructions. I can't." His eyes went blank. Empty. He raised weapon toward her. Elara moved before conscious thought. She struck rifle barrel aside, drove into his solar plexus. He doubled over. She caught rifle, cleared it, pushed him away. "Restrain him." Second affected operator was rising. Elara read intention, dropped low, swept his legs. "Lawson, I need that shot now." 15 seconds. Device pulse peaked. Light-filled chamber with painful intensity. From stairs came thunder of boots, contractors responding. Elara made a decision against every tactical principle. She ran towards Scythian device, directly into broadcast field where interference was strongest. Pressure exploded inside skull. Voices flooded consciousness, commands bypassing rational thought. But Elara had survived this before. In Syria, exposure had nearly destroyed her mind. But in 2 years' recovery, her neural pathways had adapted, built resistance. Still hurt like hell, but she could function. She reached platform, drew combat knife, began attacking fiber optics. Armored cables resisted, but repeated strikes frayed outer coating. Contractors poured in, 6, 8, 10, weapons raised. They hesitated, confused. "Stop her! Kill her now!" Contractors opened fire. Rounds snapped around Elara. She threw herself behind device, using priceless artifact as cover while attacking cables. One strand parted in spray of glass fiber. Device pulse faltered. 2, 3. "Lawson, anytime!" Sharp crack of high-powered rifle. Ceiling exploded in concrete dust. Ranging shot. Second round was perfect. Bullet struck central junction box. Entire broadcast array exploded in cascade of sparks. Device pulsing stopped instantly. Blue-white light dimmed. Team members under influence collapsed like cut puppets. And Elara was already moving. She vaulted platform, drove into nearest contractor group. 3 men. She killed first with his own weapon. Brutal disarm, redirecting sidearm under chin. Second got knife between vest plates to heart. Third got throat strike collapsing trachea. All 3 down in 5 seconds. Remaining contractors reassessed. They began coordinating, fire and maneuver. But they'd forgotten Team Phantom. Freed from influence, operators came back with lethal efficiency. Suppressed weapons coughed from multiple angles. 90 seconds later, 8 contractors dead, 3 wounded, rest retreating. Status: 2 wounded, non-critical, everyone operational. Secure device, photograph everything. Master Chief, those reinforcements, 2 minutes out, 2 Humvees with 50 cals and a Bradley. We need to extract. Elara looked at device. Core artifact remained intact, still pulsing, faint light. As long as it existed, Keller could rebuild. Negative, we're destroying this completely. She pressed C4 charges against device surface. Captain, that technology is worth billions. That technology murdered Echo Company. Some things are too dangerous to exist. 60-second timer. All elements, emergency extract. Building coming down in 1 minute. Captain, those vehicles are close. Move fast. Team Phantom pulled back. Hit stairs at run. Emerged into ground level filling with smoke. Flowed toward northern exit. Behind, Keller's voice over speakers, filled with rage. "You've accomplished nothing. I have backups, redundant systems." "Maybe, but I ruined your demonstration." Timer hit 0. Device exploded. Not with fire, but electromagnetic pulse overloading every electronic system. Lights died. Generators screamed. Ancient artifacts shattered to fragments. Building began collapsing. Concrete groaned and shrieked. Team Phantom burst from northern exit as roof caved in, burying underground chamber under tons of rubble. They ran into desert darkness. Tracers cut through night, but Team Phantom was dispersing. Kane's element provided covering fire. Lawson picked off targets with calm deliberation. Ilara led through terrain she'd studied, trusting navigation and GPS. 20 minutes, brutal pace. When Ilara called halt, team collapsed in exhaustion. Head count, everyone accounted for. 2 wounded, but ambulatory. 0 fatalities. Against impossible odds, Team Phantom survived intact. What now? Kane asked. Keller will spin this as rogue operation. We have evidence, Ilara showed photographs and video. Documentation of technology, facility, senator's testimony. And Graves has insurance package ready. Will it be enough? It has to be. Extraction helicopter arrived 40 minutes later. As Team Phantom loaded, Ilara took last look at burning compound. Keller's reinforcements arrived too late. The Scythian device was gone. Small victories. But for first time in 11 years, Ilara wasn't fighting alone. She had allies, evidence, survivors who could testify. The broken sword had drawn blood. The helicopter bore them east as dawn broke, painting sky red like fire, like blood, like justice approaching. 12 hours later, Ilara Thorne stood in a detention cell at Fort Leavenworth. 8 by 10 feet of concrete and steel. Her life as she'd known it was over. Arrest came the moment the helicopter touched down. Military police, weapons drawn, reading charges that made her actions sound like terrorism. Unauthorized destruction of government property, willful disobedience, murder of federal contractors, conspiracy to commit treason. General Richard Keller himself signed the warrant. Senator Whitmore confirmed Keller's version. Captain Thorne exhibited erratic behavior, destroyed atmospheric research equipment, killed security personnel defending government property. Team Phantom separated, each under investigation, pressured to testify against Ilara. The message: cooperate and save career, or stand with rogue captain and face court-martial. Colonel Graves under house arrest, charged with aiding fugitive. Darius Kane officially listed killed in action. No testimony, no corroboration. In 72 hours, Keller constructed narratives so airtight, even people who knew it was false couldn't find cracks. The cell door opened. 2 guards entered, followed by woman in civilian clothes. Captain Thorne, I'm Janet Morrison, attorney with Judge Advocate General's Corps. Court-martial convenes in 4 days. Pentagon, closed session, 7-member tribunal with Keller as lead prosecutor. So not even pretending fair. They don't have to, Morrison showed charge sheet. Life imprisonment minimum, potentially execution on treason charges. Then why are you here? Morrison's smile was sharp. To tell you that you have more allies than you think. Graves's insurance package went live 6 hours before arrest. Every media outlet, every congressional committee received data dump, making Keller's operation impossible to ignore. Ilara's heart kicked up. He did it. 3 senators called for investigations. 2 newspapers running stories. Pentagon in damage control. You're too high profile to disappear quietly. But not enough to avoid court-martial. No, but Keller's wounded. Morrison leaned closer. People in Washington been trying to expose Artemis for years. Graves's dump gave them ammunition, but they need credible witness. They need witness who won't die mysteriously. Exactly, which is why I'm not actually JAG. Morrison showed ID, Department of Defense Inspector General's Office, Special Investigations Division. Internal Affairs for Pentagon. Among other things, 4 days you stand before tribunal. Keller presents fabricated case. Then we introduce evidence he doesn't know we have. What evidence? Ever heard of Brigadier General Nathaniel Cross? The name rang bells. Echo Company's oversight commander before transfer to Keller? Correct. Cross smelled something wrong but lacked proof. Spent 11 years investigating with Graves. Compiled testimony from 3 other Echo Company survivors living under assumed identities. Ilara's breath caught. 3 others survived? Can't give names yet, but they're ready to testify. Morrison stood. 4 days, Captain. Use that time to prepare mentally. Won't be easy, but when it's over, Echo Company gets justice. After Morrison left, Alara lay back and stared at ceiling. 3 other survivors, allies in Inspector General office. Evidence packages distributed. Maybe mission wasn't over. 4 days. She closed eyes and prepared for most important battle of her life. The Pentagon tribunal chamber was smaller than expected, more intimidating. Wood paneling absorbing decades of destroyed careers. Raised bench with 7 senior officers. Gallery seating with congressional staffers, DOD officials, intense faces. At prosecution table, General Richard Keller, 64, silver hair groomed, uniform bearing more decorations than museums. Casual confidence of someone who'd never lost. Ilara sat at defense table with Morrison, dress uniform stripped of insignia. Admiral Winston Blackwood, 70, weathered face, served as chairman. He called session to order with gavel strike. This tribunal examines charges against Captain Alara Thorne. Charges substantial. Evidence in closed classified session. Captain Thorne, do you understand proceedings and charges? Yes, sir. How do you plead? Not guilty on all counts, sir. General Keller, present prosecution's case. Keller stood with grace. Gentlemen, case before you is tragic but straightforward. Captain Thorne is damaged individual, suffering PTSD and delusional thinking. She constructed elaborate conspiracy theory to explain failures and justify erratic behavior. He activated display showing Alara's edited service record. Her file shows classified deployments with minimal details. Performance adequate but unremarkable. No combat awards, no distinguished service. Yet placed in command of elite training program, decision that proved catastrophic. Next slide showed Arizona compound ruins. During hostage rescue, Captain Thorne deviated from mission parameters without authorization. Destroyed valuable research equipment worth hundreds of millions. Killed 8 federal contractors lawfully defending property, and fabricated conspiracy theory about mind control technology and shadow programs, claiming she was part of classified unit that doesn't exist. He paused. Echo Company. Unit Captain Thorne claims destroyed in Syria 11 years ago. No records of Echo Company exist. No mission logs, personnel files, evidence this unit ever existed beyond Captain Thorne's delusion. Keller turned to face Alara. This is not conspiracy, gentlemen. This is tragedy. Decorated general advancing critical research, undermined by disturbed officer who should have received psychological help. Presentation continued 90 minutes, each piece carefully constructed to paint Alara as unstable, delusional, dangerous. When he sat down, tribunal expressions suggested devastating case. Blackwood looked to Morrison. Does defense wish to present? Morrison stood, trembling slightly, not with fear but barely controlled anticipation. Defense calls Brigadier General Nathaniel Cross, retired. Chamber doors opened. The man who entered was 73 but moved with predatory economy. Uniform bore markers of career at sharp end. Decorations from Cold War operations still classified. Command insignia from units written into legend. General Cross had presence making senior officers straighten. Keller's face went carefully blank. Cross was sworn, took seat, waited with patience of someone preparing for this moment over a decade. General Cross, what was your relationship with Echo Company? I was original oversight commander before transfer to Keller in 2012. Echo Company was multi-service special operations unit for highly classified missions. What happened to them? Deployed to Syria May 2012 to secure chemical weapons facility. Mission went wrong. Entire unit lost. 20 operators wiped out in structural collapse during extraction. You didn't believe that? No. Timeline wrong. After action reports too sanitized. Keller got promoted 6 months later. Morrison pulled up documents. What did you find investigating? Evidence of systematic cover-up, mission logs contradicting reports, financial irregularities, and most damning, witnesses. What witnesses? 4 Echo Company survivors living under assumed identities 11 years, gathering evidence against man who tried to murder them. Chamber erupted. Tribunal members leaned forward. Keller's composure cracked. Defense calls these survivors to testify. Doors opened again. 3 people entered with distinctive bearing of combat veterans. 2 men, 1 woman, early 30s to mid-40s. Civilian clothes but posture screaming military training. When Alara looked at them, she saw reflected same haunted knowledge from her mirrors. Survivors, brothers and sisters from Echo Company, returned from dead. First to stand was the woman, early 30s, athletic, eyes that had seen too much. State name and former unit. Warrior 18, Echo Company. Civilian name classified but service records available under seal. Warrior 18 describes Syria, May 2012. Over 30 minutes, Warrior 18 laid out truth. Mission parameters not matching reality. Discovery of Scythian device. Team's realization they'd been sent to help develop weapon. Finally, moment Keller ordered elimination. We were underground when explosives detonated. Keller rigged entire facility. 19 died immediately. 4 survived through luck, buried under rubble, making our way through collapsed tunnels. After escape, we split up, went underground, knew Keller would hunt us. So we hid, changed identities, spent 11 years documenting everything about Artemis. Second survivor, Warrior 9, corroborated every detail. His testimony included technical specifications matching Alara's recollections perfectly. Third survivor, Warrior 15, provided financial documentation showing Keller profiting through contractor kickbacks. By the time all testified, tribunal's neutral expressions shifted to something darker. This wasn't delusional raving. This was systematic, corroborated testimony backed by documentary evidence. Morrison turned to Alara. Captain Thorne, take the stand. Alara moved to witness chair, was sworn. Captain Thorne, you are Warrior 26? Yes. And you survived Syria? Barely. I was in lower tunnel when Keller detonated facility. Explosion collapsed structure, but created breach in exterior wall. I escaped with severe injuries and memory loss. What happened after? Made it to Turkey, collapsed in street. Local hospital saved my life but took 2 years to recover and remember who I was. When memory returned, I realized Echo Company erased from records. I couldn't come forward without proof, so went underground gathering evidence. Morrison showed Tribunal Arizona evidence, photographs of device, video of facility, Whitmore's testimony before pressure to recant. Why destroy device instead of securing it? Alara looked directly at Tribunal. Because some technology is too dangerous to exist. Device doesn't just control actions, strips away free will. Echo Company died because we discovered that technology and planned to report it. I destroyed it because allowing it to exist, even for research, guarantees eventual weaponization. That's not risk I was willing to take. Keller stood for cross-examination. Captain Thorne, you claim severe memory loss and trauma. How can Tribunal trust recollections from 11 years ago when medical records show significant cognitive impairment? My memory of Syria is perfect. Trauma burns certain experiences with absolute clarity. Or creates false memories, Keller paced. You have no physical evidence, no independent witnesses beyond 3 who appeared conveniently today. Just your word and conspiracy theories. And financial records, mission logs. Senator Whitmore's testimony before you intimidated her. Bodies of 8 contractors defending facility that supposedly didn't exist. Those contractors died because you attacked without provocation. They died because they were complicit in your illegal weapons program. There is no illegal weapons program. Then explain Scythian device fragments currently being analyzed by Defense Intelligence Agency. Morrison interjected, holding up document. Fragments recovered from Arizona before collapse. Fragments showing clear evidence of electromagnetic manipulation technology exactly matching Captain Thorne's description. Silence. Keller's face went pale. Those fragments are classified. They were classified until General Cross provided authorization for independent analysis. DIA report completed this morning confirms every technical specification Captain Thorne and survivors described. She distributed copies to tribunal. Device exists, program exists. Keller has been running it illegally over a decade, murdering American soldiers to protect secrets. Keller's composure shattered. This is witch hunt. Conspiracy by disgruntled officers to destroy dedicated public servant. Then explain financial records, Cross said, standing. $47 million in kickbacks from contractors, offshore accounts, real estate purchases far exceeding military salary. Explain mission logs, Warrior 9 added, showing orders to sanitize Echo Company with extreme prejudice. Explain why you specifically requested Captain Thorne for Arizona, Warrior 15 said, if not to eliminate last surviving witness. Tribunal chamber transformed to controlled chaos, evidence piling faster than Keller could deflect. Blackwood called order with repeated gavel strikes. This tribunal takes 30-minute recess to review new evidence. General Keller, Captain Thorne, remain available for recall. As tribunal members filed out, Elara looked across chamber at Keller. Their eyes met. She saw in his expression dawning realization his empire was crumbling, but also calculation. Look of predator with one final card. Tribunal reconvened exactly 30 minutes later. Blackwood's expression had shifted from neutral to grim. Tribunal has reviewed evidence, testimony of multiple witnesses, documentary evidence, technical analysis. We find evidence compelling and disturbing. He looked at Keller. However, before judgment, General Keller requested opportunity to present additional testimony. Given gravity, we'll allow it. Keller stood. Elara felt ice in stomach. This was final play. Gentlemen, everything you've heard is technically accurate. Echo Company existed. Scythian device is real. And yes, I authorize sanitization of Syria facility. The admission sent shockwaves. But what you haven't been told is why. Echo Company was compromised from beginning. We had intelligence suggesting foreign penetration. Multiple operators suspected of planning to defect with device to hostile power. He pulled up classified documents looking disturbingly official. Syria operation was designed to neutralize threat while protecting device. Yes, I ordered facility destroyed. Yes, Echo Company died, but they died as traitors would have died, prevented from selling American technology to enemies. Elara surged up. That's a lie. Echo Company was loyal. Because you'd been recruited by foreign intelligence, Keller interrupted smoothly. Captain Thorne, your 2 years in Turkey weren't recovery. They were debriefing. You were turned by Turkish intelligence, possibly Russian assets. Your story about escaping is cover for defection. The accusation was so outrageous, Elara couldn't respond, but she saw tribunal members' faces, saw doubt creeping in. This is insane. You're manufacturing evidence. Am I? Keller showed more documents. Then explain communications intercepts showing contact between you and foreign operatives during Turkey. Explain financial transfers to accounts in your name. Morrison stood, objecting fiercely. These documents are fabrications. Documents bear proper classification markings and authentication codes, verified by National Security Agency. Elara watched her case dissolving. Keller spent 11 years preparing, constructing fallback positions. It was working. Tribunal members conferring, examining documents, earlier certainty replaced by doubt. Blackwood raised hand for silence. Tribunal needs time to examine new allegations thoroughly. We're suspending proceedings 24 hours for verification. It was over. Ilara could see it. Even if not convicted, she'd be tied up in investigation while Keller rebuilt program. Echo Company would remain unavenged. As tribunal prepared to adjourn, chamber's main doors burst open with crash, making everyone jump. Armed military police flooded in, weapons drawn. But they weren't moving toward Ilara. They surrounded General Keller. Behind them came figure making even tribunal members stand, Secretary of Defense himself, flanked by Attorney General and FDI Director. General Richard Keller, Attorney General announced, "You are under arrest for treason, murder of federal personnel, conspiracy, and violations of Uniform Code of Military Justice, too numerous to list." Keller's face went through shock, fury, calculation, finally, despair. "You have no authority." "We have every authority," Secretary cut him off. "Past 6 hours, federal grand jury hearing testimony and examining evidence related to Project Artemis. They've issued indictments against you and 14 other officers. You're done, Keller." FBI Director stepped forward. "Documents you presented have been analyzed by Cybercrimes Division. They're sophisticated fabrications created within last 72 hours. We have digital forensics proving they're fraudulent, along with communications logs showing you ordered their creation." Keller was handcuffed, read rights, led from chamber. Man who'd wielded power with absolute confidence, reduced to just another criminal. As he passed Ilara, he stopped, forced MPs to pause. "This isn't over. There are others. Program continues." "But nothing," Ilara interrupted. "Echo Company is no longer forgotten. Truth is public. And you're spending rest of life in prison remembering Broken Sword brought you down." Keller was led away. Chamber remained in stunned silence. Blackwood cleared throat. "Given developments, this tribunal suspends all charges against Captain Thorne, pending completion of federal investigation. Captain, you're released from custody." Proceedings dissolved into controlled chaos. Morrison grabbed Ilara's arm, pulling her aside. "There's someone you need to meet." She led Ilara through side door into smaller conference room where Colonel Graves waited, along with 3 Echo survivors in figure Ilara recognized. Darius Kane, very much alive, sitting in wheelchair but grinning. "Surprise," Kane said. "Turns out my death was greatly exaggerated." "How?" "General Cross pulled me from Arizona rubble, faked death to give Keller false confidence, kept me hidden while building legal case." Graves approached Ilara. For a moment, they just looked at each other, grieving father and woman who survived when his son hadn't. Then Graves pulled her into fierce embrace. "Derek would be proud. They're all proud. Echo Company finally has justice." Ilara felt something breaking inside, 11 years of control finally shattering. She didn't cry, couldn't cry, maybe forgotten how, but weight that had pressed down over a decade lifted fractionally. "What happens now?" General Cross answered, stepping in with quiet authority. "Now we finish the job. Keller's arrest is just beginning. Artemis has roots throughout Pentagon. We need to systematically dismantle entire network. And we need people who can't be bought or intimidated to lead that effort," Secretary of Defense added. "Captain Thorne, I'm creating Special Oversight Division tasked with identifying and eliminating programs operating outside proper authority. General Cross will head it. He's requested you as Deputy Director. I'm still captain facing. You're getting promoted to Commander, effective immediately. Full exoneration, restoration of all rights, and commendation for extraordinary service exposing systematic corruption." Ilara looked around room at survivors and allies. "What about Echo Company? Will they finally be recognized?" "There's going to be memorial," Graves said quietly. "Arlington National Cemetery, public ceremony, all 19 names scheduled for next month." Next month. After 11 years classified, forgotten, Echo Company would finally come home. The broken sword had cut deep enough. 6 weeks later, Elara stood before Echo Company Memorial at Arlington. Black granite, simple and elegant, inscribed with 19 names and warrior designations. Family members gathered, parents, siblings, spouses, children grown up without fathers and mothers. Graves stood beside her, hand resting on memorial where his son's name was carved. Kane, using crutches now, represented his brother. 3 other survivors formed honor guard, no longer hiding. Media cameras captured everything. Congressional hearings ongoing. FBI arrested 37 people connected to Artemis. Keller sat in maximum security prison, awaiting trial on charges ensuring he never saw freedom. Elara stepped forward to microphone. Echo Company was created to operate in shadows, she began, voice steady. We did things our nation couldn't acknowledge. We accepted that obscurity as price of service. She paused. But we never accepted that our service would be erased completely. 19 warriors died in Syria, not because mission failed, but because they succeeded too well. They discovered technology that should never have existed and had courage to say it needed destroying. Graves stepped forward, placing wreath at Memorial's base. Those warriors were betrayed by system they trusted, but they were not forgotten. Their families never stopped asking questions. Today, finally, they received recognition they earned. Elara moved to Memorial, running fingers over carved names. Derek Graves, Kyle Kane, 18 others whose names she'd carried in heart 11 years. Broken sword tattoo we wore marked us as Echo Company, 7 lines beneath shattered blade representing promises. Promises to never forget, never surrender. Keep fighting even when weapon breaks. She pulled up sleeve, showing tattoo to cameras and crowd. Today we keep those promises. Echo Company no longer buried in classified files. These warriors are honored, remembered, and their sacrifice means something beyond mission that killed them. Ceremony concluded with full military honors. 3-volley salute, taps across Arlington's hills, flags folded and presented to families. As crowd dispersed, Elara remained before memorial. Footsteps approached. General Cross. Oversight Division starts operations next week. We have authority to investigate any classified program showing indicators of operating outside proper channels. And if we find more programs like Artemis, we shut them down, publicly, permanently, with full accountability. Cross moved beside her. Won't be easy. We'll make powerful enemies, but that's the mission now. Yes, sir. I saw a recruiting video for Echo Foundation, training program for female special operators, emphasis on ethics and accountability. Elara smiled slightly. Someone needs to make sure next generation does better, that they understand serving your country sometimes means saying no to commanders. Graves as senior advisor, Kane as tactical consultant. You're building quite a team. They deserve to be part of this. Echo Company's legacy shouldn't just be about what was done to us, should be about what we're building to prevent it happening again. First class starts when? 6 months, 15 candidates, all female, all volunteers understanding their training to be guardians. People who can function in shadows but never lose sight of light. They stood in silence, paying respects. Finally, Elara stepped back, came to attention, rendered perfect salute. Mission complete, Echo Company. You can rest now. She turned and walked away from memorial, leaving past where it belonged, while carrying forward promises that would shape her future. The broken sword had cut through 11 years of lies. Now it would serve different purpose, not as weapon of vengeance, but as tool for justice, symbol that even shattered, warriors could continue to serve, to protect, to honor oath sworn to defend Constitution. Elara Thorne, Warrior 26, survivor and guardian, walked into Virginia sunlight with head high and purpose clear. Mission never truly ended for Echo Company. It just evolved. And 7 lines beneath Broken Sword would always remind her why that mission mattered, why some battles had to be fought, and why cost of justice was always worth paying, no matter how high that cost might be.